Now, I'm just going to start out this morning and kind of tell you how I got to this point for this sermon today. I'll go ahead and give you the title. The title of this sermon would be called Our Generation. That's the generation of most of you out there, minus our youth and our kids. What's our generation responsibility regarding the next generation? What are we supposed to be doing for the next generation? And kind of how I got to that topic this morning was, of course, Wednesday night, we went to Fields of Faith in Fordyce. And see, now I'm starting to do like Noah. But that's just the spirit, you know. It was encouraging to go and see all them kids dedicated to being there for the Lord, you know. And, of course, Noah, when he got the talk, you know, I think Bearden was the hypest crowd there, and we were all looking forward to getting to hear Noah speak. But he spoke on Joshua 1:9 about having courage and being able to be strong and be able to do what he was doing for the Lord, which that day was speaking, you know. And that next day at work, Lord just kept on talking to me. He's like, man, what are you doing for your youth? What are you doing for your kids? And it was harping on me that as a church, how are we showing up for our kids? What example are we setting for our kids in service, in life, and how we are leading and guiding them? So that's kind of the point to where I got to this service today about regarding this generation's responsibility for the next. And I'm going to start out today in Psalms 78, verse 4 through 5. In Psalm 78, starting verse 4, it says, and I'm reading through the New Living Translation. That's been actually one of my favorite translations right now to read from. But verse 4 says, we will not hide these truths from our children. We will tell the next generation about the glorious deeds of the Lord, about his power, and about his mighty wonders. For he issued his laws to Jacob. He gave his instruction to Israel. He commanded our ancestors to teach them to their children, so that the next generation might know them, even the children that are not yet born, and they, in turn, will teach their children. So each generation should set its hope anew on God, not forgetting his glorious miracles and obeying his commands. And then they will not be like their ancestors, who were stubborn, rebellious, and unfaithful, refusing to give their hearts to God. And today, that kind of sets the tone for this sermon. And I kind of got 4 points: the who, the what, the why, and the how we should go about being shown responsibility for this next generation, how we should lead and how we should guide them. And the first point in this sermon would be the who. Who's responsible for teaching this next generation? I mean, it ain't up to the pastor, just the pastor. It ain't up to, really technically, it ain't up just to the parents, even though that's what this is focusing on. It's really up to all of us. It's up to the church. It's up to who should be setting an example for them. And in Psalms 78, 5 and 6, it says, he, which is God, commanded our fathers to teach their children, so that a future generation, children yet not even born, might know. They are here to rise and tell their children. Notice at least 3, possibly 4 generations are mentioned in Psalm 78 in them verses about the fathers, their kids, the kids yet to be born, and then their kids. So that's saying right there, that's putting a lot of responsibility on us as parents Us as church members that stepping in, filling in the gap for kids that ain't got that parent in here. If we don't show that example, if we don't teach them, if they don't see that godliness from us, where are they going to get it? And I'm going to kind of step away from that and even get it in a little bit deeper. If we're not reading the Word, if we're not praying, if we can't worship in church, if we're a dead church, what's that next generation going to be? They're going to be even more deader than us. They're going to read, they're going to study less, they're going to pray less. We got to step up. I'm not saying that we're not doing enough, but I feel like we could all do more. How are our kids ever going to be on fire for God if we're not on fire for God? And going on from that, from the time that God established His covenant with Israel, He commanded parents, mainly in the biblical times, it says dads are to take the lead to teach their children. Who in the world would teach their children? Who in the world would teach their children? The same imperative is found in the New Testament. Bring your children up in training and instruction in the Lord. In Ephesians 6:4 it says, Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger by the way you treat them. Rather, bring them up in the discipline and instruction that comes from the Lord. So that tells you right there, if we're not using this Bible here and we're not living for God, how are we bringing up our kids? What example are we setting for them? We're setting that ungodly example. That's why this is so important. That's why we need to get in our Bible. That's why we need to live for God. Because I kind of look at it this way. Our worst day, or the worst that we are, or our weakest spiritually, that may be the strongest our kids are for God. If we're that weak for God, then how are they going to be stronger for God? How are they going to know what the next level is? That's what I worry about today. You know, as a kid, I grew up in a AG Pentecostal church. I mean, we had altar services. We spoke in tongues. When I was a little bitty kid, I've seen people falling out in the Spirit. I've seen Jericho marches. I've seen all that. I've seen people get healed at the altars. You know, and sometimes I kind of feel like we're missing that. Are we still seeking after that? How are our kids going to know to get that spiritual nourishment if we're not even getting it, if we're not even seeking after God? How are our kids going to learn and know how to seek after God? The responsibility to disciple children falls squarely on the shoulders of parents, and this requires a strong intentionality on your part. You got to be intentional about teaching them. Don't be discouraged, or don't give up, or don't. I hate to say this, and I'm guilty of it. Being lazy. If my daughter don't see me praying, if my daughter don't see me talking to God, if my daughter don't see me reading Scripture or trying to serve or do things for God, why should she have that desire to do that? How is she going to have that example? And this ain't in my notes, but this is for, I'll use Miss Delilah for example. I know you don't have no kids, but I know that your kids you still don't bring to church. But you bring kids to church. Miss Ann brings kids to church. It ain't just they're filling in a gap there. They're a good example. That's the same example we need to be. Just because you're not a kid's parents don't mean we can't set that example for these kids. Don't mean we can't love them. Can't mean that we can't pray for them. Can't mean that we can't get in the altar and pray for them. I think the fire, it's got to start with us. If we're spiritually dead, I believe our kids are going to be spiritually dead. And the second point in this sermon is the what. What must we teach the next generation? We can look again at Psalm 78, verse 5. It said, He established a testimony in Jacob, set up a law in Israel, which He commanded our fathers to teach to their children. The word of the testimony is sometimes used in the Old Testament. That refers to the tablets of stone, which the Ten Commandments were written. Like in Exodus 25:16 talks about that. This word relates to to what God has required of His people. The word for the law here is Torah. It means instruction. In context, it refers to commands in the Mosaic law. The emphasis in Psalm 78:5 is clear. It's that God-inspired and authoritative word we must teach to our children. If we're not teaching them the rights and the wrongs, if we're not teaching them the word, then how are they going to know right or wrong? If we're lost, they're going to be lost. If we're not doing right, they're not going to do right. I mean, it's pretty simple. It falls on us. If we're not setting that example or we're letting them slide, I know sometimes some parents, and it ain't me because Angela will probably say I like to get on mine too much, but I mean, if we don't, then they won't know. Yes. I mean, they'll just be like, well, I can get away with this, or I don't have to worship God. Oh, my mom and dad, they're not going to church. Why should I have to go to church? I mean, my mom and dad, they don't pray. Well, I need to pray. They're kids, little kids all the way up to teenagers. They're going to pick up off of you. They're going to pick up what example you're setting for them or what example you're not setting for them. That's why it's so important that we got to be wholeheartedly into this thing in our relationship with God. We got to be determined to teach and lead our kids. I see a generation. I'm encouraged by Noah and some of our kids because they want to grow closer to God. They want to serve God. But we got to keep on reinforcing that, giving them encouragement and leading by example. I mean, it's not always easy to step up. I'm not going to lie. I'm not no good pastor. I'm not no good preacher. I'm not none of that. But I believe the Lord opens up that door. I'm going to try to go through it. I'm going to try to serve God in any way that He allows me to serve, whether I'm good at it or I'm bad at it. It don't matter. It's just the point that you serve God and do what God wants you to do for Him. And that's a good way to set an example for your kid. Now, this is hard and this is harsh. It's basic. I mean, when my girl don't want to come to church, sometimes I tell her, look, do you love God? God wants us to go to church. It's about loving God. It ain't about what we're doing or any kids or any activities, even though that's all good stuff and that stuff we want to provide. But I try to tell her, we're coming to church to love God, to go closer to God, to have that relationship with God. That's what it's about. And the third point here I'm going to is the why. In Psalm 78, it also answers the why question. So that verses 6 and 7 means to end that and points to the desired outcome of an action. We are to teach the next generation. Why? So that they might know God through His words. Point 2, so that they might trust Him. So they can put their confidence in God and they know that God has their back no matter what they have to go through. Just like Noah was talking about Joshua 1 and 9. Having that courage to do that. The Lord, if he's trusting in the Lord and he's brought up that way, he knows the Lord will bring him through that. He done an excellent job. I think the Lord brought him through that just fine. I think he done great. I think the Lord can do the same for you and your kids. But are you trusting in Him? Are you going with His guidance and applying it to your kids and your life? And the third point in that why is so that they will obey Him, to keep His commandments, state it negatively, so that they will not become another stubborn, rebellious generation who are not faithful to God. If we're rebellious, if we're stubborn, if we don't come to church, well, what are you going to expect? Most of the time, it's just like the Bible verse says, you kind of sow your own seed. If you're not serving God, don't expect your kid to serve God. If you're not living fully for God or you're living a stubborn, rebellious life, if you're out there doing sinning, let's just call it out, drinking, smoking, whatever you want to call, whatever sin you want to call out. If you're out there doing that, don't be mad when your kid does it. I mean, I'm not going to say no names, but I had a friend like this. One night, I wasn't even doing this, but she came up to me, why are you smoking with my kids? I said, first of all, I'm not smoking with your kids, but how are you getting on me for smoking with your kids when you smoke? What kind of example is that? I said, how about when you quit smoking, then let's talk about your kids smoking. She didn't want to talk to me no more after that. She kind of got mad and stormed off. But, I mean, I kind of just had to call it like I saw it. I wasn't going to take it. But the why question also finds an answer in 2 Timothy 1 and 5. 2 Timothy 1 and 5 says, I remember your genuine faith, for you share the faith that first filled your grandmother Lois and your mother Eunice. I might pronounce that wrong, but that'd be okay. And I know the same faith continues strong in you. That tells us right there that how important it is for one generation to lead by example by the other generation. You know, I can go back and look at my grandmothers, and now I remember my great-grandparents a little bit, but by the time that I come along, they were getting in worse for health and weren't able to go to church. But my grandmother, anytime, my grandmother Mosley, anytime the door was open, she was in the church. Anytime they needed somebody to serve, cook, when she went to Fordyce, she helped with fish fries. Every fish fry they had, whether it was making hush puppies, filling up drinks, setting out desserts, whatever they need done that she was capable of doing, she would do. And I remember she always had a Bible laying out somewhere. And just being a little kid, being nosy, my mom used to have pens and little notebooks laying around. Well, I got one of them out one day and was looking through it, and it was just notes, study notes, notes after notes. Some of the writing was hard to read, but it was my grandma was committed to God, loving God, studying His Word. That set an example for me. Yeah. And it's been, I think, 2 or 3 Easters now. I talked to my grandmother, and this was like maybe 2 months before she died. Before she was just laying there, not able to do anything. And I was talking to my grandmother. I was like, I'm going to be preaching the next Sunday. She said, oh, you're preaching now? And then we were talking about how my grandmother always wanted to write music. And she kind of did, but she never sung them or had music put to it. But she loved trying to write songs. And we were just sitting on the porch talking about how we loved singing in church and how she was proud of me for trying to serve God. And it just touched me. It made me proud. And it also made me glad that I grew up in a family, not a perfect family, but a family that was brought up always to be in church and always to serve God. And that's how I think having them 2 generations before me serving God, if I didn't have that, I don't know I'd be here today. Sometimes I wonder if I'd be in jail. Sometimes I wonder if I'd be dead. Because at my lowest points in my life, God always came back and talked to me. He said, I love you. And at the lowest point in my life, God, it's like I could hear His voice. He said, I love you, Tim. And it just got me back to where I needed to be, because I know I haven't always lived perfect. I hadn't always served God perfectly, but being brought up in that, and I'll read that verse later on, it's like it never leaves you. If you're brought up and taught that, most of the time, if you teach your kids like that, they're going to come back to God eventually. It's like the prodigal son. One day, keep praying. They'll come back down that driveway. They'll come back to God. We want the next generation to have a sincere faith. That's what 2 Timothy 1 and 5 is talking about. The word sincere conveys authenticity. Authenticity. You mean being sincere and truly, yes. Wanting to be true and have a true love for God. We teach so that the next generation will know and trust and obey God. The desired outcome goes beyond just hoping our kids will stay out of trouble. That ain't enough. Just staying out of trouble ain't going to get your kid to heaven. It means we seek to raise up a faithful, a passionate follower of Jesus Christ. That's what we want. That's what we want our kids, our next generation to be. And that's where it falls back on us. That's what we need to be. Going back to, if we're not it, don't expect your kids not to be it. If you're lost and you got a kid that's got saved and close to God, you've been extremely blessed, because it don't always work out that way. And the next point, and the last point, is the how. How how do we bring up this next generation? How do we teach them? It says, look again in Psalm 78 for the answers. It tells the stories of what God has done, the praiseworthy acts of the Lord, His might, and the wondrous works He has performed in verse 4. The next point talks about teach what God requires of us. That's verse 5, the testimony, the law, what we should do, what we shouldn't do. And the third point in the how is warn against sinfulness in verse 8. It's kind of funny. It's like you always hear the saying of that one little white lie and how it can turn into something bigger and bigger. It's just like one sin. It's like when I was a teenager and a young adult, and this is sad. I didn't always feel like the church, or I had no good church friends that was there to support me. At a point in my life, I was kind of lonely and wanted to be involved in the world. I wanted somebody to be involved with. When the church wasn't there and didn't step up for me, I started getting that friendships outside the world. I got into a lot of things I should have been doing. But luckily, being raised right, I kind of came back to my senses and came back in the Lord. But it's once you get in that sinful process, it's kind of easy to get swallowed up and ate up by that. We don't, and I'm going to go ahead and read Deuteronomy. Let me see here. Deuteronomy 6 through 7 right now. Deuteronomy 6 and 7, it says, "And you must commit yourselves wholeheartedly to these commands that I am giving you today, and remember to repeat them again and again to your children. Talk about them when you are at home, and when you are on the road, and when you are going to bed, and when you are getting up." Right there, that talks about a lot of dedication and how we're to do it. It's not just always about our Sunday school teachers, our youth leaders leading them in the church. We got to be doing it at home. We got to be doing it throughout the day. Any chance you can get to encourage your kids or talk about Christ or get involved in church, get them involved. In Deuteronomy, the 6 passages before issuing the command to teach the next generation, God says, "These words that I'm giving you today are to be in your heart." That's in verse 6, and it's adding emphasis to that. Teaching involves explaining to your kids what they observe in their lives. And I'm going to kind of turn it into a kind of a question today. What are your kids, what are they observing from you? Are you setting that example for them today? Just think about the ways we could be doing better, or think about the ways we're not doing better, or think about that time you got mad. And I have a temper sometimes too, and I know Angela will probably agree to that. But if you speak out of anger, and your kid hears that, that's not a good example. I'm guilty of that. I'm guilty of not reading and studying as much as I should and doing certain things. But it's never too late to grow closer to God and correct that. And this brings us back to Timothy and his sincere faith when he first lived in, which is the verse we read earlier, 2 Timothy 1:5. His grandmother Lois and his mother Eunice, it lived in them, and by the word and example, he will teach the next generation to be passionate followers of Christ. And that's, and thankful for his grandmother and his mother, he had that example. And and really, honestly, today, that's just really what the Lord was putting on my heart. I didn't go really too deep into what we're doing in the church and what we're not doing, because I was told, make it short, make it quick. And my wife told me, reaffirm that, make it short, make it quick. Then Meg reaffirmed that. Then so I'm saying, okay, it's going to be short and quick today. We got food waiting on us and all that good stuff. But, really, let's look at it. And just this simple. And I'm going to close it up with this. Are we on fire for God? Are we in these altars? Are we living it out at home? Are we living it in the church? Are we willing to serve? Are we willing to be the Christians that God calls us to be? I know that not everybody's called to serve in certain positions, but ask yourself, and I want you to ask yourself this, are you actually willing? Are you even listening to God? Are you really wanting to hear from God? Because trust me, if you're willing, God will give you something to do for the church, for your children. I just want to encourage us all to try to be better examples, to grow closer to God and try to help our kids, our teens, our little kids. If we don't do it, the world ain't going to do it. The world don't care. Let's not make the devil's work easy. Let's not make it easy for them. As a church, parents and just church members as a whole, I encourage you, let's lead this next generation. Let's seek God wholeheartedly and live accordingly to His law. And that's really all I have today, but I guess I'm going to go ahead. If you want to come up here and play something, Johanna, I know this is not no revival evangelist type sermon, but I also believe that I don't never want to be up here and not open up the altars for any kind of need. Even if I say today, if you feel like you could just be a little bit closer to God, come down here and pray about it. If you want to, it don't even matter if you're not seeking that. It won't hurt us. We still got 16 minutes till 12 o'clock. We could come down in this altar and pray for just a couple minutes. Lord, give us strength, give us encouragement. And that's what I'm going to do now, just kind of open up the altars. And I encourage you to come pray and ask God, what can I do to lead my church, to lead my kids, to be that example that you have me to be, so we don't grow up a generation that's lost, a generation that has no hope, a generation that don't have a clue how to lead the church. Because I got hope. I believe in a lot of our kids here can do that. I believe they're going to be the next generation to bring fire and revival. And I'm